I remember the sound of that last crack, splintering wood mingling with silence. I stood there, staring at the shattered cabinet door, remnants of my childhood spilling out onto the floor. Broken trinkets, dust-covered photo frames, and little notes I'd written to myself, all trapped behind glass for years. My hands trembled, blood pounding in my ears as I clutched the edge of the counter, reality crashing over me like a tidal wave. "Why don't you just stop crying and put it back together?" The voice echoed in my mind, a voice I had come to dread, the echo of my mother's sharper edges growing stronger with their absence. There I was, truly alone for the first time since my life had spiraled into chaos. And that wasn't just a moment or a metaphor. It was my reality after the storm swept through my family, leaving nothing but wreckage in its wake. Before I get too deep into it, tell me in the comments, have you ever found yourself trapped in the shadow of someone else's pain? I'd love to hear your story. The cabin had its charms, but it also trapped years of heartache, like a cage of memories I was no longer willing to hold onto. I'd turned it into a retreat after the accident, a place to heal, away from the relentless noise of my family's expectations and drama. But now I was left with one more splintered piece of evidence of what I thought was home. This place, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like another battlefield. It all started a few weeks ago. I was 28, feeling on the verge of something good. I had a steady job I loved, a beautiful tiny garden outside the cabin, and slowly but surely I was learning how to stand on my own 2 feet again after years of catering to my family's needs. Then came the phone call that changed everything. My mother, my rock, the one who held our tiny family together, collapsed at home. After hours of silence, my brother Zach's frantic voice finally broke through. "They can't find the pulse. We have to get to the hospital." That day felt like smoke rising in my lungs. I rushed to the hospital, but the usual scenes of worry and anxiety unfolded into something far grimmer. As I stared at my mother in that sterile room, surrounded by beeping machines and lifeless shadows, reality washed over me brutally cold. She might not come back. But this wasn't just about losing her. I felt a different kind of terror rise within me. I was forced to play the part again, the rock, the strong one, the responsible daughter. It didn't matter that I was dealing with my own wounds. No, it was my mother's shivers in her hospital bed that defined me now. "Take care of everything, Sarah," the doctor said, their words curling around me like barbed wire. "You're the one who knows her best." As the days went by, information turned into action. From managing her medical bills to organizing every aspect of her care, I found myself pushed into a whirlwind. I barely managed to breathe. In the chaos, I even had to shoulder Zach's emotional outbursts as he wrestled with an absence he didn't know how to articulate, a role I had played for him too many times before. He was the fragile one, lost in a world that suddenly turned upside down. "You see, I'm falling apart." He had cried one night, frustrated, those words piercing through me like shards of glass. Instead of processing my own grief, I became the pillar upon which he leaned, my heart breaking quietly as I held my family together like wet tissue paper, fragile and fraying under the weight of my wounds. Weeks stretched into months, punctuated by endless hospital visits and late-night whispers of memories that drew me deeper into an abyss. I often grappled with resentment toward Zach, who only charged in once things escalated. The feelings churned inside me like boiling water, 1 minute calm, the next threatening to spill over. I had always been the responsible one, the sister who held everything down while he chased dreams that often slipped through his fingers. And yet, I kept telling myself it was worth it to be there, to show up because, after all, family was family, wasn't it? But even that term began to lose its meaning. Families can also hurt, demand, and suffocate us. Then came the incident that cut deeper than anything, a family meeting organized to discuss my mother's condition and long-term care needs. At the center of it was our family's shared history and inevitably the shadows of unspoken grievances. It became evident. We weren't just grieving my mother's illness. We were weighted down by the years of emotional neglect. "Sarah, you need to do what's best for Mom." "She can't live alone anymore," Zach said, his tone a measured pressure. "What do you want me to do? Pick up the pieces again? I have a life too." I snapped back, feeling heat rising in my chest. "Don't be selfish," he shot back. "You're making this about you." It was the familiar pattern, the words twisting in my gut, forcing me to wear the mask of understanding for a brother who couldn't see past his own pain. Somewhere in that meeting, I felt the shift. My stomach knotted as the dots aligned into clarity. I was drowning in their chaos, fighting to be seen, but what I needed most was to be heard. The weight of sacrifice had become exhausting, suffocating me in ways I could no longer ignore. I wanted to shout that I needed help too, that I was holding my breath beneath the surface, dealing with my own pain in silent agony while they basked in the comfort of absolute despair. I began to break, piece by piece. The nights grew darker and the anxiety deeper, flooding my thoughts like relentless waves crashing at the shore. And finally, I landed at therapy, where I spoke what I hadn't acknowledged beneath the surface. "You think you're the strong one, don't you?" my therapist, Lisa, said quietly one afternoon. I nodded, tears forming. "I have to be. But what does it cost you?" The question rattled around in my mind, slowly chipping away at the walls I had built. Was my strength a shield I had tightly wound around me, or was it more like chains shackling me to burdens I could hardly bear? Weeks turned into sessions of unearthing old stories and voices that I had never listened to. The little girl who craved recognition, who felt invisible beneath a mother's spotlight shining only for her brother. It was time to face the truth I'd long buried. I could behave like a martyr to my family, but I could not be that girl any longer. I had to prioritize myself, as painful as that realization felt. In that newfound space, I began to find strength beyond just standing firm. I started to carve out my own identity. Evenings that once belonged to endless phone calls became moments for self-care. I read books, revisited hobbies I put aside when life swept in, and most importantly, I reconnected with friends who reminded me of the world beyond all the noise. Reclaiming my voice meant stepping away from being the familiar caretaker. It meant saying no when Zach wanted to run things past me as nonsense, or when friends asked me to be the strong shoulder once again. I remember sitting there trying to explain to him why he spat my kindness back in my face, how time and again I had buried my needs beneath the weight of expectation. "Zach, it's not going to work like that." "Not anymore," I spoke quietly but steadily, feeling as though I was finally coming alive. It was a breakthrough moment for me, a realization that I would no longer live within that shadow. And in that delicate climb towards self-discovery, I saw the shards of my past for what they were, roadmaps showing me where I'd gone wrong, finding the lessons hidden in the wreckage. But still, there were difficult conversations ahead. We had yet another family meeting after her health declined again, and I didn't want my role to revolve around only my mother's declining health. Yet I heard Zach's words, framing me once again as the burden he never wanted to carry. "Why do you think you know what's best?" He grinned before hurling another accusation of selfishness. The air stung with tension. In that moment, fire surged in my chest. Was I being selfish for wanting to reclaim my life? Because our lives don't just revolve around patience for our mother and her health. It's not only about her. I finally yelled, watching his face contort as realization dawned on him. Suddenly silence enveloped the room, the tension wedging us apart like a chasm. It dawned on me that perhaps we were both sons and daughters of our own stories, searching for validation. After that moment, things didn't magically fix themselves, but a shift had occurred within me. I engaged with the darkness and reclaimed my narrative. Days turned into steps toward healing, and I found solace in diving into writing again, pouring my heart. I penned letters that traced through the shadows of grief and being pushed into silence. And then one evening, after a long day of work and healing, I summoned the courage to pull out some dusty letters tucked away in my drawer, ready to share those feelings lovingly onto paper where they lingered in my heart. As I closed my eyes, my fingers moved almost of their own volition, reckoning with the truth, thoughts spilling out in raw handwriting. I dared to write things I hadn't said before, digging deep into the roots of my emotions, the heartbreak I had felt quietly while trying to support my brother. I shared my dreams and the battles I faced every single day. In penning those letters, I finally began to change the script of the narrative around me, from simply holding space for others to embracing my own heartbeat, demanding to be seen. Each word was a solid step toward reclaiming the strength that had always existed within. I eventually shared my letters with Zach, raw, unfiltered, enlightening words that spoke to my heartache, the burdens I had carried, and the courage that could take root in the tension we had faced. His response was unexpected. "I never meant to make you feel this way," he said one day, voice softer now, emerging from behind the tumults of resentment. My heart opened enough to see past the shadows. Maybe strength didn't always mean being invulnerable. Maybe it meant opening doors to vulnerability. Maybe it meant understanding that our love had been intertwined with many kinds of hurt. The acceptance shifts days later as my mother stabilizes, and finally, I start to breathe again. The fractured relationships slowly guide their steady ground towards healing. I realize that recovery is not just fighting against the tides. Healing happens when we learn to forgive both ourselves and those around us. My brother and I found a way to navigate the edges of our relationship, walking towards healing. Just like the broken cabinet door in my cabin eventually became a beautifully handcrafted version of itself, so too did our family learn to compose a new kind of strength, not one built on ruin, but one grounded on resilience. And maybe one day, I'll hang a sign on that repaired cabinet, dedicated to the paths of healing we each took, leaving small notes to ourselves that say, "You are enough." So whenever it seems that the pieces don't fall into place just right, remember, sometimes it isn't about fixing what's broken, it's about rebuilding it into something new. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It took a long time to heal, and I'm still learning each day. I want to ask you guys, have you ever faced a moment that felt like an end, only to discover it was your beginning? Let me know in the comments below if my story resonated with you. I'd be so grateful if you'd give this video a like and subscribe for more stories. It really helps the channel out. See you in the next one.